What we've got here is failure to communicate. Some men you just can't reach. So you get what we had here last week, which is the way he wants it. Well, he gets it.
Where there's thunder, there's lightning. I am John Nada, and these are the days of thunder. Today I'm kind of going to be all over the map here. Got a lot of ground to cover, but I had a lot of just different ideas that came together. And we'll be talking about the Psychocircus, or the mystery funhouse with the funhouse mirrors. And along with that comes the whole idea that I remember getting fed from being, at a very young age, a very small child, the whole idea of the feminine mystery or the feminine mystique. Men will never understand women. Women are so complicated. But are we really to believe that women are more complicated than space? Are we really to believe that women are more complicated than DNA? I mean, supposedly there's this agreed upon idea that women are so complicated and we'll never figure them out. But yet we have figured out so many things that really is miraculous and very, leaves one awestruck when you think about the things that we've unraveled and the mysteries we've unraveled about our universe and space, and the ability to map the human genome and the ability to understand DNA. Mgtow, though, more or less has figured out the mystery of women. We Mgtow have figured it out. We've realized patterns after dating so many women that they're really not that much different from one another. We have a term AWOLT, and there's a reason why such a term exists. All women are like that. When you read things such as Bruford's Law and all that goes along with that, the idea that the majority, if not all women, want protection, resources, security, the bigger, better deal, the whole idea of hypergamy and branch swinging, yes, Mgtow has more or less figured out. In the way that scientists have mapped the human genome, Mgtow have been able to map female behavior. But are women really all that complicated when I know that the majority of the time, women I've spoke to are unable to talk about topics outside of relationships, fashion, and children. Basically, any aspect outside of the social arena, I haven't found too many women to be knowledgeable about. It was the male mind that launched us into space and landed us on the moon. The male mind makes up almost entirely all philosophy and religion. It's the male mind that wrestled with human experience. Primarily, the male mind bore civilization when it fashioned the first stone tool and created fire. Going back to this whole idea of women and patterns and relationships, when I look at the different women I've dated or interacted with over time, I noticed that they all basically wanted the same thing. Most of the time, the relationship didn't work out for basically the same reasons. And there was really very little difference in, things besides maybe basic interests and family upbringing. But beyond that, it was all kind of the same precarious dance. If women were so complicated, by inference superior to men, why are things like games so successful? Why is it possible to develop a system that works on the majority of women? If anything, the female mind is more hive-like and herd, as evidenced by the importance of having social standing. Like it or not, the PUA gaming system, it does work on women, and there's a reason why it works on women. Now, that being said, the biggest flaw with PUA, or one of the biggest flaws with PUA, one, you're still serving as a slave to the master. You're still in that slave morality construct or paradigm. But the other thing about it is something that a friend of mine pointed out. And they always talk about in PUA and all that, holding frame and running game and you're spending this tremendous amount of time, energy, and effort trying to develop yourself, or essentially develop a character or an avatar, an aspect of yourself divorced and devoid of who you really are. And so to me, it's kind of like, as I said, a friend of mine pointed out, what is what is the purpose of it? Because ultimately they're not falling in love with you. They're not falling in love with your personality or who you are, but they're taken by who they think you are. They're taken by the character you've created. And the minute you let your guard down, or the minute you express who you really are, or express anything outside of the stereotype or character you've created for yourself, the whole thing comes crumbling down like a house of cards. So in the end, what's the point of that? But yet it does beg the question as to why a creature who's supposedly so much more complicated is so easily fooled. And another thought that I had is, we talk about this being a funhouse. We talk about this being a psychocircus. That is the dating world, the modern Western idea of relationships. As you get older, and it doesn't even have to be an age thing, but it tends to be more typical as you get into your 30s and so on, late 20s and 30s, there's simply no decent women left. There are very few women that, as you get older, as you get up into your 30s, that aren't, that don't have children or haven't been previously married and are now divorced. The ones that are attractive, it's a crapshoot as to whether or not they're going to be sane or not. So the pickings are very slim on women who don't have all this emotional baggage, or women who don't have all this physical baggage. It's kind of like the Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. Pick the right door and you'll go free. Pick the wrong door and there he'll be, or rather maybe there she'll be. And in addition to that, the tired argument of women have it so much harder than men. Well, I think that women have an easier time and have more of an advantage in terms of when it comes to there being more decent guys out there, more guys that have it together financially, more guys that are successful, more guys that are, decent looking guys. I think women have more of a pick from there being more dateable men than when you flip it around for guys, and there not being that many dateable women. And yet we're supposed to accept every flaw and every aspect of the woman. But then when you look at how picky women are in terms of some of the things they're picky about, and it's especially hypocritical too when you talk about single mothers who have children of their own, maybe by the same father, maybe not, but yet they do not want to date single fathers. Women benefit exponentially more when it comes to society at large than men do. I mean, there's all kinds of battered women's shelters, affirmative action to give women employment, scholarships entirely for women and women alone. They have more right to genital integrity. Generally are more believed when it comes to things like rape and abuse. When men come forward, having been raped or abused, they're more or less laughed at. Women have more birth control rights, or more control when it comes to reproductive rights and parenting rights. I mean, there's nothing in terms of reproductive rights for men except for a condom. And when it comes to parenting rights, generally women are awarded custody of kids in the courts, but they also have the right of whether or not to be a parent or not. Men don't get this right. It's women that are able to terminate pregnancies or leave a child up for adoption. And let's face it, as a man, you have to work. You have to have some sort of plan. You have to plan things out, get an education, have some sort of skill in order to be successful. You have to earn money, whereas women have the safety net of they don't have to be particularly intelligent or smart or talented at anything or have any ideas or anything of that nature. They simply need to marry a guy that will take care of them. They have the safety net financially that most men would have if they learned a skill or education and got a good job and a 401k and Social Security and medical insurance. Yet they need only marry the right person, whereas men have to work towards this in their career. But a lot of guys in Mgtow, at least early on, it seemed, bought the myth of foreign women being better than American women or Western women. And one of these, this idea was kind of brought forth by Winston Wu and the Happier Abroad people. But I never will forget when I saw the movie Birthday Girl. You see the reality of that foreign women are no different than Western women. It's just a question of how far their culture and society lets them go. But the minute you bring them to the West, you can rest assured that they're going to be tainted by feminism. They're going to be tainted by first, second, and third wave feminism. They're going to be tainted by the whole Western mindset, the whole women are wonderful mindset. And so it's only their own culture and society that keeps them in check. We've even seen this, and I brought this up in previous videos with so-called transgendered people. And I noticed there's a particular Mgtow channel, The Pretender, where the guy kind of talks about a little bit why it seems that here in the last couple of years, a lot of men have been looking towards so-called transgendered women as an alternative to women in the West or in their own culture. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of them being more feminine in terms of looks and demeanor, the fitness standard, in terms of how so-called transgender women dress and how they take care of their physical form and everything else. I mean, that I think is a lot of the draw for that. But in the end, it's as fake as a lot of women who use makeup to appear more attractive, or who use all these other tips and tricks. But the hypergamy level has actually gone up. It used to be that I think these people just wanted acceptance and wanted to find somebody who would accept them for who they are. But I don't know if it's the hormones or the culture, but they seem to be just as hypergamous as actual women. And yet it's all Funhouse mirrors anyway, right? It's as if women look into the mirror and they see what they want to see. They see the illusion and think the illusion is real. And while we're talking about fitness standards, there doesn't really seem to be any for women. We're bombarded with this idea that women are constantly told they need to be thin, they have to be this, that, or the other. But in reality, most men are willing to lower their standards and are pretty accepting of a pretty wide variety of different shapes and sizes and looks. But there's only one fitness standard for guys, and that's 6 foot tall, ripped abs, everything else. So, I mean, who really has it harder in those terms? There's also the myth of the real man. Women are still considered real women, even though they may be unmarried and a virgin. And they're still considered real women even after they slept with 100 different people and been divorced 4 or 5 times. But there is no real woman standard in terms of the way there is that a man has a standard. A man must establish himself to be a real man in terms of what society thinks. And there's, of course, a list of things you must do to be a real man. You must have this job, or you must make this amount of money, or you must be a father. But there is no list requiring women, requiring anything of women to be real women. So anyway, it's kind of like I said, a lot of stuff, a lot of ground covered. But it all goes back to reaching this self-awareness and higher level, and understanding that in the end, it's you who looks yourself in the mirror, and you either like what you see or you don't. This has been the Days of Thunder. I am John Nada. And remember, you're free to do as you're told.